So every day we document here and in my videos and books and articles and lots of other places. We document how reporters just can't get it right when they talk about race. Every day. I mean, so at some point, all of us, when we're walking down the street, aren't we entitled to kind of like do a little bit of self-examination? Aren't we required to do a little self-examination and go, well, I don't know. I don't know what makes me so smart. I don't know what makes us so smart that we see this and nobody else sees this. So let's talk about that for a minute. Hi, this is Colin Flaherty. I'm the author of Don't Make the Black Kids Angry. Welcome to my podcast, which of course Apple just kicked off because somebody was offended by it, but lots and lots of other places to subscribe to this podcast. So thanks for listening, and I hope you will subscribe. Here we talk about black violence wildly out of proportion and how so many reporters and public officials and lots of other people, they are in denial, deceit, and delusion about what is really happening, putting a lot of people in danger and just generally polluting what and how we talk about things in this country. So let's get back to this whole idea of, okay, so, what makes us so smart? It's not like we're doing the conspiracy theory thing here where I'm asking you to believe things that I can't put right in front of your face and show you. I mean, that's why we have to do stories every day, not just on the podcast, but in other places. We have to do stories every day to say, yeah, this is happening every day, all over the country. It's always about the violence and the denial. But it's almost like you and I are walking down the street and we see one of our neighbors holding up a sign that says 2 + 2 = 5. And we look at it and we go, well, I don't know, that's not true. And we see another sign, another sign, another sign. And by the time we get to where we're going, a quarter mile away, we see 50 people holding up signs saying 2 + 2 = 5. Well, how long is it before, you and I are pulling our fingers out of our pocket, or at least, counting our fingers off? 1, 2, 3, 4. 2 + 2 = 4. I mean, how long will it take us? How many signs do we have to see before we start doubting that 2 + 2 = 4? Then how many signs do we have to see before we start apologizing to the people that notice that when we engage them in a conversation about the 2 + 2 = 5, how often do we apologize for noticing that, well, you know what, I've been thinking a lot about this and got my fingers out. I looked looked on the news, and I don't think 2 + 2 = 5. And then people yell at us because we don't know what we're talking about and we don't know mathematics. And Colin, you don't have a PhD in mathematics and you don't know the numbers. And everybody with the 2 + 2 = 5 signs, they gather around. They pat each other on the back, congratulate each other for their brilliance. Very famous scientific experiment. It's famous because it was basically, people figured out it was completely unethical. But I think it was conducted in the late 50s. And there were this psychologist went to this mental institute where there were 3 people who claimed they were Jesus Christ living in this facility. So we put them all in the same room, and he sits down and he goes, blah, blah, blah. All 3 of you can't be Jesus Christ. I mean, maybe not any of you, but we know for sure all 3 of you cannot be Jesus. And what the 3 people in this asylum did was they started ganging up on the interviewer. They started sharing their delusion that at least one of them was Jesus, and it was very, and none of them would admit they were in delusion. They started attacking the guy who figured out they were in delusion. So that's what people who consume popular culture are faced with every day. It's not just, I think this topic of black violence is probably is probably where we find the most widespread level of denial, deceit, and delusion, where it's the deepest, where it's the most unexamined. But I mean, this is something we see every day. Okay, look, for example, just this week. So today is Thursday. I think the word came out on Tuesday or maybe Wednesday that an American Air Force officer, or a woman who used to be an officer at any rate, in military intelligence, high-level military intelligence, keeping an eye on the people in Iran, our assets in Iran. She defected to Iran and was doing everything she could to let the Iranians know who American friends were in Iran. And I saw this story on the news, and I saw the pictures and thought, that there's something about that story that's just not right. We're not getting the whole story. And the first thing I wondered was, is that woman, did she convert to Islam? You know, kind of like that show Homeland, where the big war hero comes home and it turns out he's secret Islam working for those guys the whole time. It was one of those deals. And the first day story, not one of these major news outlets thought it was important to tell us that woman was that Air Force officer, military intelligence officer, was a Muslim. She converted to Muslim, and not just the old, pat little children on the head kind of Muslim. No, the nastiest kind, where you go around strapping on suicide vests and blowing people up. That kind of Islam. Nobody mentioned it. Nobody thought it was important. Nobody. Second day story, it starts coming out, because there are limits to even what the most determined person in denial, deceit, and delusion can refuse to report. And that's where most of the denial, deceit, delusion comes in, right? Not what they report, but what they fail to report. Though interestingly enough, we do see a lot of stuff in what they call photojournalism. I've never, that's like the second time in my life I've ever used that word. Photojournalism. Yes, we use pictures to tell a story. They use pictures of a white guy in handcuffs to describe the black people they just picked up for a crime. Anyway. So we see every day that reporters and the people who run the legacy media in this country just can't get it right when they're having anything to do with Islam. I used to do a radio show with my brother, and whenever we would talk about this, he would go into his denial, deceit, delusion mode. And I would say, well, what about, female genital mutilation? He goes, oh, that's only in Africa. Well, what about throwing gay people off buildings? Well, that's only there. Well, what about honor killings, where the father kills the daughter if he thinks she's getting too involved in Western culture and not Islamic? Oh, that's only there. And so we would take, all these examples of these abominations attached to Islam. Every time he said, well, it's only there, you start sticking pins on a map, and pretty soon you've got pins on every, a map filled with nothing but pins. But the reporters, they still kind of want to pretend that all this Islamic stuff is just isolated. Nothing to do with anything. It's isolated, Colin. That woman that was defecting to Iran, the fact that she's a Muslim, doesn't have anything to do with anything. Colin, if it did, we would have put it in the damn lead. Didn't go in the lead, did it? The New York Times got around to doing the story. They buried it way down at the bottom. Oh, yeah, she converted to Islam. Oh, yeah. And during this process, when she was spying and gathering information and turning it over to American enemies about America's allies, Yeah, she also went around the corner and got an ice cream cone. Those are the two. That's about how important the conversion to Islam was. They just consistently can't get it right. But their own self-regard is so high. They built a museum down in Washington called the Newseum. It's a museum dedicated to journalism. And they'd have these seminars in there. You'd see them on C-SPAN, the reporters sitting up there patting each other on the back as to what a great profession they have and how great they were to be in it. They'd be on a big stage, and every once in a while they'd extend their arms saying, okay, give us your adulation now. Yes, we deserve it, little people. Come unto us. But everybody's walking down the street going, oh, let me see, hold on. 2 + 2 = 4. I'm pretty sure it's 4. Why are those guys at the museum doing a museum to the whole idea that 2 + 2 = 5? Because I'm not really into those guys, because lots and lots of people see how the reporters screw up stories every day. That's why after 10 years, they just announced they're closing this museum dedicated to the news business. This is 10 years of every major outlet in this country running several stories about what great things are in this museum, what great people are there, great seminars, great exhibits. All this free press, and people still wouldn't go to the stupid thing because way too many people know the jig is up and they don't have any interest in hearing any more from these people who have been living in such denial, deceit, and deception for so long. I mean, was there one single story screwed up more? Well, you know what? This is a lot of competition. Screwed up more than the Covington kids at the rally in Washington, D.C.? And now today it came out in the paper where I think an investigation started by the bishop of that diocese where the kids go to school, high school, a Catholic boys' high school. The bishop comes out and says, oh, well, we did an investigation and the kids are cleanly exonerated. This was the same bishop, the same Catholic authorities in that diocese who threw those kids under the bus the first minute they got a news report that something was going on down there. And the first week of that story, everybody agreed what was going on. Because everybody knows that white racists are roaming the countryside, attacking elders of Indian tribes. Everybody knows that's happening. So this was just one more example of that, right? Oh, by the way, there were some black people nearby reading the Bible too. Did you know that? And you just see what those kids were doing? They were smiling. I'd like to smack the smirk off that little punk's face. How many people with blue checks posted that exact tweet? Many, many people. Went on for days and days and days, despite the video evidence that was right there. Everybody knew what had happened. They drew the conclusions. They knew that those white kids must have done something to those poor Indians and black people. Because everybody knows who's a reporter that black people are relentless victims of relentless white racism all the time, everywhere. That explains everything. Especially why white kids are always smirking when Indians and black people are taunting them with racial and sexual epithets. And not one reporter could figure this out. Yeah, okay, conservative reporters figured it out. Sure, I posted something on it right away. I looked at the video. I saw what had happened. I saw what they said had happened. I saw this customary gulf. I was far from the only one to figure this out. But it's just another example of how locked in these reporters are into this mindset, this worldview. And they just can't get out of it. They can't break away from it. It's not an isolated thing. When you see so many reporters get so many stories wrong, focusing on this Covington story, they got so many parts of the story so wrong. That really gives us an insight into what they're thinking in their head, and how it really gives us an insight into how they're prejudging the world, how they're shutting down observation, because once you make this huge judgment, you're starting to filter all your facts through the lens of that judgment. Look at those white kids. They've got MAGA hats. Oh my. So that became after a lot of people figured out that the black people and the Indian were provoking the kids, and the kids acted like complete gentlemen not to do anything to provoke them. Then the story became, well, they were wearing MAGA hats, and everybody knows a Make America Great Again hat is the same as a hood. Then reporters took that and ran away with that for a while. 2 + 2 = 5. You don't agree with that? Then go F yourself. That's what we're hearing. That's what we hear every day from mainstream media. That's what we hear every day on MSNBC, CNN. That's what we hear and it's getting, we're starting to hear more and more about this, right? About how we're hearing it, but we're also, the advertisers are playing a bigger role in this. The advertisers are really telling the TV, the major networks and the major media people now, they're really dictating to them. It's like, no, we want a certain kind of coverage on certain kind of issues, or else we're not going to advertise on your show. And the advertisers are pretty clear that we don't want any stories to screw up the narrative of relentless black victimization. Why do so many people get kicked off Twitter, Facebook? I got kicked off iTunes this week. I've been on iTunes for 5 years doing this podcast. And then all of a sudden you get a note going, you don't even get a note. You just like, hey, why do my views go down all of a sudden? Why do my podcast listens go down all of a sudden, like by 50%? Then I get an email. Hey, Colin, where's your podcast? I can't get it on iTunes. Oh, shoot. I'm reading this book now. What's it called? It's by the guy who wrote I'm reading this book now. I think it's called The Fire Column by Wilbur Smith. He's the guy who wrote that book that kind of has a cult following about the people who built the cathedral in the Middle Ages. Fiction. Anyway, this is kind of same world, maybe 100 years later, the time of Queen Elizabeth. And so part of the story is unfolding in England, and the other part, right before Queen Elizabeth becomes queen, there's a Catholic Queen of England. The other part of the story is unfolding in Spain, where we get to see this Catholic monarchy going hand in hand with the Inquisition to go find people who may be Protestant, who may be Jewish, who may and you may not be fully down with the one and only true faith. And these scenes in the book, basically these priests and these members of the Inquisition, they just show up, they tell you what you did wrong, and the more you argue, that is the more proof that you are guilty. And then the punishment starts. Very, very nasty business. Well, because there is no response to a charge from an inquisition. There is no response. You are guilty. That's exactly what I got from Apple this week. They just sent me a note, because I had sent them a note. I said, hey, why'd you guys kick me off my podcast? One line note. We removed your URL and RSS feed from our site from iTunes because your material was offensive. Yeah, I know we hear that word so much, but it is fun once in a while just to unpack it. I mean, it's offensive. Nobody said, Colin, what you said was wrong, and nobody's willing to engage on exactly what's in these podcasts. Nobody's willing to engage what's in my videos and books, because they know that people at Apple and the people at Facebook and YouTube and Google, they are fully down with the cause. Google and YouTube, they give black people millions of dollars to make movies that are nothing but fairy tales about black victimization. If you want to make a movie about black people, Just go to Google and say, listen, you guys only have less than 1% of black people work, and your workforce is less than 1% black. So you better give us some money, so we'll crank up your numbers, and we'll also be quiet about the whole black thing happening at Google. How does that sound? I mean, there was a story, you guys remember that? God, Breitbart did such a fantastic service on this. They found a Google community meeting, had the CEO and 4 or 5 of the top people up there in an auditorium with, 1,000, 2,000 people in the auditorium, all Googlers. Plus, this was broadcast around the world. God, it's amazing. It took a year for this video to leak out. 1 year. Tens and tens of thousands of people saw this video, at least that many. And nobody leaked it out for a year? And the video was all about how the world was ending because Trump and those big bad white people, conservatives, are now taking over the world and the world's going to end. So we at Google have to figure out how we are going to stop that. There were no black people in that room, okay? And yet Google and Apple and Facebook and everybody else, they're allowed to come in and tell us that when we talk about this enormous level of black dysfunction and denial, they're the ones setting the standards. They're the one playing the white knight. They're the ones saying, hey, Colin, just because we don't like black people, that doesn't give you the right to go around telling people about this level of violence and criminality that's putting so many people in danger and how people like us are actively trying to hide it. We're going to deem whatever you do, we're going to deem that offensive, Colin. Colin, 2 + 2 = 5. Go ahead, say one thing and you will be considered offensive. Go ahead, make my day. It's the Inquisition. It's the Apple, Google, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter Inquisition. I can't help but think whenever I see get something like that, the first thing that always comes to mind is some 23-year-old kid with purple hair, usually a girl, and tattoos. And she's screaming inside of her cubicle that, she's going to stop this, blah, 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 because it is offensive to her. Wow. One of the reasons reporters get away with the 2 + 2 = 5 story so many times is because a lot of times they'll couch it in probably, or they heard, or somebody else said 2 + 2 = 5, and we got to do a reaction on the 2 + 2 = 4 crowd because everybody's upset that somebody disagrees that 2 + 2 = 5. I mean, it wasn't that long ago where I was, in newsrooms and, it wasn't the New York Times. I've been in a lot of newsrooms. I taught classes to reporters. It wasn't that long ago where you would sit. I mean, sometimes the reporters would get together maybe once a week in a little room and everybody would say what stories they were working on and maybe somebody would contribute something to it. Very rarely would somebody stand up and go, oh, that's a pile of BS. Don't work on that story. But it seems like everybody knew that. I mean, you could say in that newsroom, you go, I think probably this happened, and that's what I'm going to work on this week. I'm going to try to nail it down. But now these probably discussions are now considered to be news stories by themselves. It's probably true that, white people in MAGA hats are roaming the countryside. That's probably true. I mean, when you read these stories, when you watch the TV and listen to the NPR radio or other stations, listen to how much speculation is in there and how this speculation never used to escape the newsroom. Yeah, reporters knew their speculation was true, but there's always usually some adult in the room saying, listen, okay, I appreciate your strong feelings that 2 plus 2 equals 5, but could you at least give me a couple sources? Oh, damn it. And that's why everybody loves to work at, they imagined they wanted to work at the New York Times or NPR, because there, the editors aren't big babies. They know that reporters are geniuses, and they allow their speculations to appear in print and in the news. I mean, what about this story what about this FBI story? This acting director of the FBI, McCabe, he said he's the one who started the FBI investigation of Trump because he thought Trump was probably a Russian agent. And all he had was a dossier written by opposition researchers paid for by the Democrats. Now, I've been in that room too. I used to do opposition research for Republicans in Southern California. But that's where you would start. You would start with somebody going, "Oh, hey, Colin, I heard our opponent was doing such and such in such and such a place." You go, "Okay, I'll check it out." Or, that would just be in addition to all the other, checks and things. And you go to maybe they sat on a border commission. You go to the library back in the day. You'd open up the minutes and you see the minutes and you see what they were talking about. And you see if the person even showed up. See if they showed up, what they contributed, what they voted on. It sounds a little boring. But, there's lots of other you go to the tax records to see if everybody's paying their taxes or not. You go to criminal court to see if they've ever been arrested for anything criminally or not. And you go to divorce court to see if there's ever any nasty business in their divorce file or not. But the funny thing about opposition research, as you do it, you're always, you're just picking up bits and pieces from everybody's friend or this friend. I tell you, I don't know why this is, but you always find out more about the person who hired you than the person who you're investigating. I don't know why that is, but it is. But all these things, but I can't imagine taking these speculations about an opponent and saying, "Yeah, I heard they were this and that here." They would look at me, because I wouldn't do that, but if they did, the client would have looked at me and said, What is this? We don't need you to speculate. We need you to document so we can take this to some reporter and get that reporter to publish it." But now the bar for reporters is so low, they're publishing speculation. I guess the game has changed. All you have to do is get somebody to write a piece of paper that says, "Yes, Johnny Smith is an agent of the Russian government," boom, and that's going to be on the front page of the New York Times, regardless of what's behind it. And if you give it to an FBI agent, the FBI agent goes in and tells the president, that's the story. That's how you get speculation to appear as fact. "Well, James Comey went and told Trump that there's somebody out there with a dossier that says he's a Russian agent." That's 2 plus 2 equals 5. Hey, wait a minute. You guys don't have any facts. All you have is a phony baloney dossier, right? And you didn't even tell the FISA judge that it was a phony baloney dossier published paid for by Democrats, created by a Democratic opposition research team. One of the FBI agents investigating this, his wife is part of that team. You didn't tell the FISA judge that? "Oh, 2 plus 2 equals 5, Colin. What's the matter with you?" They're just getting it wrong on so many things. So as we look at these stories, as we talk about this crazy level of black violence and denial, as we hear mayors in places like Chicago, Philly, Baltimore, Trenton, Camden, centers, hotbeds of black criminality and violence wildly out of proportion, we hear the mayors look in the camera and go, "Oh yes, very proud here to announce that crime is down in the city of Camden or Philly or Chicago or Baltimore. Very proud of everything we've done." all we can do is go, no, wait a minute. You guys have been cooking the books. You've been purposefully not arresting people. We're going to get to one of those stories here in a minute. You're not arresting black people because everybody knows the only reason any black person is ever arrested is because they are victims of relentless white racism all the time, everywhere. That explains everything. And then you come around after we stop arresting people, regardless, put your hands in the air and say, oh, crime is down now, Colin. You can have all your friends and family visit you in the ghetto now. So it's just one after another. We're sitting there going, no, that's not true. That is just not true. I don't care how many of these reporters are standing on street corners with signs that say 2 + 2 = 5. It's not true. Don't ask me to say whether it's because they're dumb and don't know any better, or it's because they're smart and they're just trying to pull a game on us. I don't know. It doesn't make any difference to me. And now we go back out to Chicago, where Jesse Smollett, the actor for the movie Empire, the TV show Empire, he's the gay actor, said he was a victim of a hate crime. They put a noose around his neck. They put bleach on him. They called him all sorts of names. But here's what got my attention from Jesse, as we mentioned before. What got our attention from Jesse is when he said, oh, this is happening all over the damn country. Everybody shook their head. Everybody shook their head and goes, yeah, what about those Covington kids, man? What about the hate crime they perpetrated on that poor little Indian and those other black dudes who were doing nothing but reading the Bible? This is a damn epidemic. And the cops go to Jesse. Hey, Jesse. We're having a little trouble finding any video of the people who attacked you. Can we see your telephone? First he says no. It takes 2 weeks to give it to the cops after he's redacted all this stuff. What the hell is that all about? Why would you redact all these phone calls? What do you not want the cops to know about what happened that night? Is that the way we investigate crime now? Is that the way we investigate hate crimes? We let Jesse Smollett dictate to the cops what they can and cannot investigate? The answer to that question is yes, because he's absolutely dictating to all the reporters all over the country what they can and cannot write about this. Without one scintilla iota of evidence, everybody went in and stayed in full speed on this Jesse Smollett hate crime story that is now just unraveling every single day. No videos, no witnesses, no nothing. I knew from minute one the key to that story is going to be to figure out where the rope came from. Oh yeah, they'll find out. Boy, there was a crazy story in Delaware that just tells you how good they are about tracing some of these products. There was a crazy story about a high-ranking Democratic official in Delaware. He got involved in one of these crazy... He was older, she was younger. She wanted to break it off. He killed her. Killed her with some help with a family member. Took her on a boat, put her in a cooler, and took a shotgun out and shot the cooler full of holes so the cooler would sink. A couple months later, the cooler washes up on the beach. But this time the murder is pretty well known. And it's known, and I think it might even be known that they shot the cooler with the shotgun. The guy finds the cooler and he goes, hey, wait a minute, I think this is the cooler they're talking about. It's got shotgun holes in it. They get the cooler, they look at it. Sure enough, they trace that cooler back right to the store where they got it from, and they trace that cooler back right to the person who bought it. Yeah. It was the guy who was accused of killing the girl and that's how they traced it. Can they do that to this rope? I'm not sure. But I think they know, these cops, they have a lot more cards up their sleeves than Jesse wants us to know about. But here's the thing, Jesse. So, here's what say you're saying you're a victim and all this stuff's happening all over the country. No, what's happening all over the country is the opposite. We see an enormous level of black on white violence. And the violence follows a pattern. Wildly out of proportion. That means it has meaning. It's not random. The fellas doing this violence don't leave little notes saying, "We don't like white people. Black power. Black lives matter. Go F yourself, white people." No, they're too busy. They're too busy laughing, shrieking hysterically, shrieking in ecstasy. That's what they do. Now, here's what makes this podcast and the stories we do different than the fairy tales you hear from Jesse and the people reporting Jesse was a victim of a hate crime. What we do is give examples, recent examples, like this story out of New Orleans. Check out this black on white violence. Check out how the people in New Orleans will do everything to not tell you that was a bunch of black people attacking a couple of tourists. Check out the damage done, the denial applied. Now everybody's happy. Check out the story from New Orleans.
Oh, it's just not my type of city. If that happens to a lot of tourists, man, I mean, you're not going to get a lot of tourists. You're not going to make a lot of money off of them because they're never going to come back.
Happening right now, the search for the people who attacked a group of tourists in the heart of New Orleans. One of those tourists beaten so badly he had to go to the hospital. Good evening. I'm Katie Moore.
And I'm Tan Trung. The visitors to our city say they were good Samaritans trying to protect a homeless woman. Danny Monteverdi was able to talk with that victim despite his injuries. He's live along Canal Street where that attack happened. Danny?
Good evening, Ton. As the police continue to chase down leads in this case, the victim of that brutal attack is now preparing for his next visit to the hospital after the sudden and violent attack.
Whit Allen and his friends were living it up in New Orleans this past weekend to celebrate his 30th birthday. They spent time drinking hurricanes at Pat O's and took in the sights of Carnival as Chewbacca rolled through the Marigny. But the fun came to a sudden and violent end early Sunday morning on Canal Street.
And when I fell into the concrete, all the teeth got pushed up into my face.
The trouble began when Allen and his friends came across a party bus near Canal in St. Charles.
The kids in the back of the bus were screaming at this homeless lady that was like sitting on the sidewalk.
One of his friends tried to step it and stop it.
Next thing I know is that all these kids, like all these guys from the bus start popping out of the bus like one by one.
Whit Allen and his friends say they were walking in this part of Canal Street when the attack happened, and they say it happened just like that.
Like maybe 3 seconds is all that it took.
Someone in the group, which Allen and his friends say was about 20 guys, threw punches. Allen and one of his friends were hit. Allen was knocked out.
I was bleeding everywhere. There was blood, just all down my shirt.
Allen was rushed to University Medical Center where doctors treated him for a broken jaw and fractures to his face.
I pretty much lost the fourth center of my teeth, and then obviously this was like a hole completely through my lip, and I had this big hole in my chin, and then there are stitches on the inside of my lip, so yeah, it was kind of extensive.
He's back home in Denver now, but he still has months of doctors and dentist visits ahead of him.
And they're going to have to do a bone graft. And they're going to have to let that heal for probably about 9 months at least. And then they'll be able to do implants so I can have teeth again.
And sadly, he says he probably won't be so quick to try to help someone else in need again.
In Denver, if I saw someone screaming at a bunch of homeless people, I definitely would have gotten up there and said something like, knock it off. But I'm going to think about that twice next time.
Is that the first time we've ever heard of a tourist walking around New Orleans and he's killed or attacked by black people? No. New Orleans is a dark and dirty and dangerous chocolate city where the mayor of New Orleans, you have a series of mayors, they all kind of appoint themselves as the arbiters of what is racist and not racist. The latest guy was Mitch Landrieu. He goes around the country now giving speeches about white racism, how we have to do better. How in his town, crime is the new black entitlement. So why doesn't everybody else in the country, why haven't they figured that out? It's not just the United States either. About 10 years ago in Australia, I don't know what happened, but I don't know if it was temporary insanity or just some kind of Australian insanity that just exploded all at once. But they all figured out they had to do two things. One, they had to change their gun laws and change their immigration policies. They didn't used to have gun laws. You used to be able to own a gun in Australia. But they did have very strict immigration laws. If you wanted to go to Australia, you had to have a reason. You had to have a job. You had to have a way of supporting yourself. You had to be able to speak the language. They dropped those barriers to enter Australia. All of a sudden, all these immigrants from a little continent called Africa started going to Australia. It's been one hot chocolate mess ever since. Check out this story. And they don't tell you this in the video that you're about to hear, but in the written part of the story, they will tell you that everybody involved, all the home invaders involved in this story, are young men of African appearance.
Some breaking news now, and a 50-year-old man has been injured in a terrifying home invasion in Melbourne. Police say a gang of 6 men broke into the house at Maribyrnong just before 4 this morning and hit the man over the head. Now, those thugs ended up escaping, we're told, with a white Mercedes-Benz and are still at large. The victim has been taken to hospital with non-life-threatening injuries.
This is not a one-off in Australia. This is now something that's occupying the news almost every day. And the only question is whether the broadcasters and the reporters are going to mention that the people doing all this stuff are black. Sometimes they don't have an option because they're doing something at the beach. Lots of black people rampaging through the beach, attacking white people, daytime, nighttime. When it's on video, the reporters are kind of stuck. They can't really ignore it that much. But you could see the same impulses going on down there in Australia, the same impulse to be in denial, deceit, delusion about the level of black crime and violence down there. Well, there's a lot of it. We've done some here. I wish somebody would open up a Don't Make the Black Kids Angry YouTube channel in Australia. You could do a lot of it. And of course, it's funny, whenever, all the stories we've done on Australia, it's always the same. Especially when it's a large group rampaging down a street at the beach or something. Of course, they always bring out the activists. Oh, these youth, they're looking for jobs. We failed them. Everybody knows the script. I mean, they just pull the script out of any American newspaper. What's the script? Why are black people attacking white people today? Today, let me see. Today's Tuesday. Yeah, I think we'll go with the jobs thing. What about tomorrow? No, tomorrow we're going to concentrate on relentless white racism for 400, 4 million, 4,000, 4 billion years. Okay, thanks. I don't know what. They just can't help it. Black people are victims. But people are starting to figure this out. I got an email yesterday from one of our viewers in Cleveland. Very short email. It just said, Colin, look how easily they took this criminal and turned him into a victim. Listen to this story. Let's compare notes on the other end.
Gagging, you put tape over my mouth at this moment.
So many of you had a lot to say when the I-Team revealed this exclusive video. Cuyahoga County Court. Duct tape put on the mouth of a convicted robber when he wouldn't keep quiet.
It's sad you are going to take a child from his dad.
Now, a local rapper has put his thoughts to music.
I must have watched the video 100 times. Once I seen the video, I went right into the booth and recorded the song.
Lock me in them chains, but you can't take my mind away. Sitting on your high horse, judging what I do. Tell me what you would have did if you was walking in my shoes. You can't.
The rapper, Hootieville, born Keith Simmons Jr. He produced a video called No Duct Tape, based on the case of Franklin Williams. Last year, duct taped at sentencing when he wouldn't shut up.
I'm not here to say whether Frank Williams is guilty or innocent, but what I do know is what happened to him in that courtroom was wrong.
You should know the rapper says he does not know the man duct taped in court. He just started thinking about sitting in one of these chairs before a judge, thinking about what had happened, all after the I-Team story started spreading on social media, and a friend had said, "Did you see that?"
Mr. Williams, I'm the judge in the matter.
Shut your mouth.
Last chance to speak his piece to the judge, and I felt like the judge showed no empathy for him.
How could you ever judge a man and you ain't been where he been?
In the Williams case, the judge apologized for the duct tape and had a new judge appointed. Hootyville sees it like this.
I'm not trying to promote anything or make any money off this. I simply did this because I was moved by his story and I wanted to bring awareness to it.
Okay, so what do we learn about that guy in the story? We learn that he's some kind of hero because he stood up for his rights with a rapper. What the hero said, ain't it sad when you separate a mom and a son from his dad, or something like that. In that story, did anybody tell you, even briefly or even hint at it, that this guy was involved in a lifetime of crime, leaving behind a lifetime of victims? Yeah, he would go around sticking guns in old people's faces and rob them. So the next time we do a story about black on senior violence, and you go, well, who would do that kind of crazy thing? It was this guy who is now a hero in Cleveland just because at his sentencing, he wouldn't shut up. And now all the judges in Cleveland are all upset that we may have violated this dude's rights by putting a gag on him. Okay, fair enough. If you want to make him a hero, fine. Please, but you're absolutely not entitled to help us forget that there are actual victims and this guy was committing actual violent acts that you want us to forget about. No, we're not going to play that game here. We don't play that game here. We expose people who play that game here. We got another email from a viewer down in Fort Smith, Arkansas. Man, so many people are figuring this out now. So many people. And the email again was short. It said, hey, Colin, I just listened to your podcast. I did what you said. I just started looking in my own paper to see, to see if I could read between the lines to see what was going on. I found this story. So here's a story. It's a short story. Maybe it doesn't even, in the scheme of things, it doesn't seem that big. But listen to that story, and then why don't we we'll place it squarely in the middle of the scheme that makes it bigger.
Fort Smith police are searching for two men suspected in a weekend shooting. Now, it happened Saturday around 9:30 at North 12th Street and Pryor Avenue. See, officers arrived to find a man lying on his back in the middle of the road. He told police officers that he was in the area to pick up a friend when two black men approached him in a white SUV and tried to rob him, and they shot him.
So I think this Asian guy was from Laos. Down there in Fort Smith. Last time I heard about Fort Smith, Arkansas, was in that movie, bookend movie, Lonesome Dove. Remember that? Think of that guy I think his name was Cooper. He was the sheriff from Fort Smith. Anyway, so this Asian guy is running around Fort Smith, and all of a sudden, a bunch of black people came up and attacked him and robbed him. Wasn't the first time there was black on Asian violence in Fort Smith. Well, I tell you, one of the first chapters in my book, Don't Make the Black Kids Angry, was about black on Asian violence out of Rochester. And they had settled some refugees from Nepal and Burma. They took them by the plane load, about 5,000 of them, and they stuck them in Rochester. So they get to Rochester, and groups like Catholic Charities, they're the ones in charge of finding houses for them. So what they do, they say is, hey, I know where there's some really cheap houses. If you wanted to buy them, you could buy them for $19,000. And everybody on the Catholic Charities Board of Directors goes, oh, that's fantastic. Not one person will say, oh yeah, those houses are in the ghetto. And you put those Asian people in the middle of the ghetto and they are going to be targets. Dead targets. Not one person said that. That's what happened. 5,000 people. Every single one within a year or two was a victim of robbery, assault, harassment, threats, even murder. Every one. You notice I didn't say just about everyone, Colin. No. Every single damn person 5 years. And by the time the local media in Rochester figured it out, they did this long story. They spent about half the story apologizing because all the time they spent on the story, well, they have to apologize if anybody's offended by the fact that 2 + 2 does not equal 5. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to say that. But we know 2 + 2 might equal 5 somewhere, just not here and now. That's all. Sorry about that. They really were doing that. And you got these Asian people, they were interviewing these Asian people. They were talking about how they desperately were trying to get the police to come do something. Arrest somebody. Put them in jail. Make a big deal about this. The black chief of police in Rochester said, "Oh no, they're going to learn what every other immigrant group learned. You have to learn how to fight when you come to the United States." Wow. This is all in my book. It's all documented. I'm not just sitting here. We don't do the let's pretend that it's fairy time, story time around here. No, we look at real news events with real people. And the Asian people, in this case, were screeching for help. Then they went to the black people involved with the United Way. All these black groups get all these like United Way money to stop violence. They go to this one group. This woman was like the head of the group called like Stop the Violence. They go, "Hey, what's up with all this black on Asian violence?" The lady goes, "Oh, I haven't heard of that." Rochester is a big town. It's not that big of a town. All this black on Asian violence and nobody gave a damn. It took 5 years for that paper to figure it out. 5 years. And it's still happening. And it's happening all over the country. There's black on Asian violence. The stories about it are few and far between. They had one in LA. This was almost 10 years ago now. This is in the footnotes of my book. In LA, they found a couple of fellows who came out of prison, put a microphone in their face, and they go, "Yeah, why? You were in prison for robbing people. Who'd you rob?" They go, "We used to find little old Asian ladies because they couldn't fight back and they always had money." They were quite happy to talk about it. Up in San Francisco, again, sometimes this stuff gets so bad, it exceeds the ability of even the most determined reporters and editors to not talk about it or write about it in any way. Up in San Francisco, the cops up there figured out that 80% of the robberies on the streets of San Francisco were black on Asian. The headline said, "San Francisco's dirty little secret." They went to some Asian people and they go, "Hey, that's not news to us. We've known about it. We've been trying to get something done, but nobody wants to do anything about it. Because crime is the new black entitlement. Can't go around arresting black people in San Francisco. Because if you arrest black people out of proportion, there's only one reason only for that. That is because of white racism." I mean, they had a huge story. They focused this story around San Francisco for a while. A huge story about traffic tickets, how we're criminalizing poverty, how black people are getting traffic tickets wildly out of proportion. They had a story about this in my little town paper, Wilmington, Delaware, the Gannett thing. The traffic cameras. Turns out like 80% of the people that were caught on traffic cameras were fellas or lovely ladies. The local town paper ran an editorial saying traffic cameras are racist. It was the same kind of story in San Francisco. This was like a thing people were doing all over the country about traffic court, how we're criminalizing poverty because not only were black people getting lots and lots of traffic tickets wildly out of proportion, they weren't showing up for them in court. So the failures to appear, like 50% of the failures to appear in San Francisco were issued to black people, where the population of black people in San Francisco was like 6%. And so everybody in San Francisco agreed. Every elected official in San Francisco agreed as to what that was all about. That was all about white racism. We have to do better. We have to stop picking on black people who are driving their cars in a safe fashion and at a safe speed. But for some reason, the cops keep pulling them over and writing them tickets. We have to do better. And now we get Asian people being brutalized regularly in San Francisco. Remember, this is a town. Remember all these places that we're talking about, all these local news outlets. Remember what their standard is. Somebody with a sign that says Black Lives Matter or white people suck, you can hold that sign up for 1 minute outside of your house at midnight on a snowy night. You're going to have 12 TV cameras there going, tell us about it. You go, yeah, do white people really suck? Black person sticks his head out and they go, yeah, they really suck. Next night on the news, newsflash, white people really suck, says black activist in the middle of the night. So those are the standards. Those are the standards for reporting about stuff about black people, that they are the victims. But when the preponderance of stories just keeps mounting up over and over and over, where we have a mountain of people, white victims, Asian victims of black criminality and violence, these reporters, they just don't want any part of that. And that's what we're doing here. We expose their little fairy tales. And now, and when I say we, I mean you and me. Because I get all these stories from you. I get all these stories from our viewers, our readers, our listeners. Story from Fort Smith. Again, it's just one guy, one Asian guy being beat up by a couple of black people. Is that worthy of a national story by itself? No. Is it worthy of a national story if it represents something way bigger? Oh, absolutely. And it is something bigger, as we've documented over and over and over and over. Don't believe me? Ask an Asian person. Ask them. Everybody's so damn polite. In Philadelphia, they had this huge rally, 5,000 to 10,000 Asian people, because Chinese people, mostly immigrants, they had an anti-violence rally. And not once did any one of those people step up and go, listen, black people in Philadelphia are targeting Asian people, immigrants, especially people who own stores. They're targeting us. Everybody was very careful to say, no, we're not selecting one particular group. Why not? The one group is responsible for the violence towards Asian people. Oh, are you living in the Jussie Smollett Disneyland world now? You think there's white people in MAGA hats roaming the countryside from Covington, Kentucky? They're attacking Indians and helpless little Bible-reading black people? Is that the world you live in? London a few weeks ago, one of these, an immigrant of an undetermined, undisclosed religion took a machete and he cut somebody's damn head off. You know what the paper said happened to that guy? They said he died from neck injuries. And now in England, a mom with 2 kids, says she didn't believe that men wearing dresses are actually women. I know this is hard to believe. The Inquisition. Men wearing dresses are not actually real women. She said that on Facebook. They came and put her in jail for 7 hours. And we wonder how reporters can keep missing this over and over and over. And maybe it's not them. Maybe it's us. It's a question worth asking. But let's make sure we get the answer straight. 2 + 2 = 4. I don't care how many people tell me it's 5. All right, before we wrap up this podcast, we're going to do something. I almost forget to do it every podcast. But I promised myself I was going to remind you guys how to support this channel, how to support these efforts. I mean, we got a lot of cool things over at my little online store on Teesprings. you can get the address from my cool little store by going to colinflaherty.com. Up top, it'll say merch. Just click on the merch thing. It'll take you right to there. See coffee cups. See what I just put up a denial, deceit, and delusion. Got a couple of those. Denial, deceit, delusion coffee cups and a t-shirt. I got a few, just put up a new one last night. It said, don't make the black kids angry. Coffee cup has a cool looking, like 1960s style fist in the air. So lots of cool things over there that you can actually, many of them are safe for public consumption. Definition of racism on a coffee cup. A racist is any conservative winning an argument with a liberal. And the support I get on this channel and on all my stuff is fantastic. I couldn't do it without you guys. I mean, it's such a big country. You guys are the ones sending me the stories. That's where they come from. Sending me the examples of denial, deceit, and delusion. Wish I could do every one. I can't. For every one we do, there's 20 sitting in my email box. I'm going, oh my God, how am I going to get to all these? So I'm just trying to show the ones, talk about the ones that really give us the biggest education, the biggest amount of illumination, the largest edification. So thanks. And if you guys want to keep supporting, there's lots of little things you can do to support this channel. They might seem inconsequential, but they're actually very important. Anytime you see one of my stories, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, here, there, anywhere, share, like, subscribe, and comment. Those 4 things are important. Do whatever you can of those 4. And if you feel like you want to do more, the best thing you can do is drop a few coins and go to old Colin's PayPal account. PayPal.me/Flaherty457. That number is that thing is easy to find at myminds.com/Colin Flaherty page. Over on the left, there's a little information thing down there. But easy to find. Drop a few pennies in there. We know that the people who run these outlets, they're just determined that people who are exposing this ridiculous level of incompetence, this dangerous level of incompetence and deceit in their news organizations, they are just going to make sure that the people who are exposing this, just aren't going to have the resources to stay in public. So that means it's going to be up to you and me. It's going to be up to you. When Apple, for example, shut me down, I feel like they're not shutting me down, they're shutting you down. And so now the question is not what I'm going to do about it. I already know what I'm going to do about it. Nobody's going to shut me down. We are going to keep producing these videos and podcasts and articles, and we are going to keep exposing people with facts and truth. So now the only question is, what are you going to do to be a part of it? The day where we can just pick up a newspaper and scan the ads and maybe go buy a car because you saw the ad for the car in the paper, and that in a way will make the guy want to advertise more in the car. Those days are over for us. They've been over. And so all of us have to realize, if we see something we like, whether it's me or Jesse Lee Peterson or Breitbart or Michelle Malkin or a lot of other people, we're going to have to make a personal connection with that outlet. And it's going to have to be a personal connection that, it's not like, okay, I actually am going to offend some people here. I don't want to offend, but we're not going to do the, Jimmy Swaggart, if I don't get some money in here by 5 o'clock, we're going to shut the whole thing down. No, we're not going to do the hard sell. But we are going to remind you that you are an important part of what's going on around here. And there are so many people so invested in this. I know we can keep this going. I know we can grow it. I know I can figure out a way to keep doing this stuff and then find some time to get back, find some time to get back to writing my books. Those are an important part of what we're doing here now. I'm having a hard time finding the time to do it. But I can do it. I know I can do it because I know you guys are with me. So thanks in advance for anything you do to kind of give me a little wind beneath my wings here. So let's close out with two stories. I mean, if I could do one of these every day, I would. One of the fellas is rampaging around an apartment complex. Cops are after him. He runs into some woman's apartment. Tries to make a little argy-bargy with her, but he gets a little surprise from this woman. Let's listen to that one.
My House, an exclusive tonight, a Tempe mom confronting a man who broke into her home, holding him at gunpoint until police could get there.
ABC 15's Zach Crenshaw live near Hardee and University. And Zach, this wild situation going down while people were enjoying the Super Bowl.
That's exactly right, Steve. It happened around 7 o'clock on Sunday night. A woman came home and saw two random shoes in her living room, and then she saw a suspect take off running barefoot. He ended up here at the Standard apartment homes, where he burst through a front door. There he found a mother of two who knew how to use her pistol.
It was either me or him, and I had two kids. There was no way I was going to let them get hurt.
This mom's young children were sleeping when Anthony Chambers burst through her apartment door.
Guy runs in. He's telling me to be quiet, be quiet. He's saying, pretend I'm your boyfriend.
She had different ideas.
I asked him to wait in the living room because the first instinct is to go grab my gun.
The mother, who doesn't want to be identified, worked to de-escalate the situation.
Just trying to calm him down and see if I can get him help.
Chambers wasn't relaxing, though, or leaving.
I dial the police up, and he snatches the phone out of my hand, and that's when I decide I can't do this, and I pull my gun out and I have it aimed at him and make sure he's standing towards the door, yelling at him, "You need to get out."
The mother says once she was able to get that suspect out of her apartment, police were already here. They gave the guy commands, but he didn't listen to them, so they released their dog on him. That canine bit the guy in the left forearm and held on. He punched that dog multiple times and even fought with officers in this tiny little space, leaving one man with a broken nose and another officer with an injured leg.
He was really fighting. Like, I heard him yelling and cussing out the officers.
It's unclear how Canine Chance is recovering, but this mom is thankful she knew what to do.
And honestly, I'm happy it was me, because if it was anyone else, who knows if they would have gotten that guy out of his place.
Now, this isn't the first time Chambers has gotten in trouble. Court documents reveal he was arrested and found guilty back in 2014 of resisting arrest and aggravated assault on an officer. Live in Tempe tonight, Zach Crenshaw, ABC 15, Arizona.
Okay, so, and here, this might be my actual favorite story of the day. This is a story, though they would never tell you this. This is a story about criminal justice reform. This is a story about how cops have been way too eager to arrest black people in the past. That's the only damn reason why so many of them are in prison. So we're going to change that. We're going to make it harder for cops to arrest people, harder for the DA to charge them, harder for juries to convict them, harder for judges to sentence them, and easier for them to get out of prison once they are in. Welcome to criminal justice reform writ large in California. I mean, the unspoken thing that's happening in a lot of places in California. You hear about San Francisco. You hear about it's kind of very dirty now, very, very dirty. These public diseases are going up. They're destroying large parts of the city where people used to love very much. Now they go and say, I can't go there anymore. There's too many bums and homeless people and criminals on the streets. Ditto for a good chunk of LA. Ditto for other parts of California. It's all because they opened the prison doors and let thousands and thousands of convicts out early when they shouldn't have done that. And now we're going to go to a little town called Hayward. We're going to see this in action. One black guy rampaging through Hayward over a period of weeks and months. And everybody looks at him and says, we can't do a damn thing to stop you. This is a guy picking up an axe and threatening people with it. And the cops look at him, and you're going to see that, well, let's just look at this, and we'll talk about the city councilman on the way out.
Julie, Frank, the most recent theft happened just last night. The owner is concerned about his customers and his employees' safety, concerned and worried it could escalate into something worse.
He grabbed one of these axes.
Jim Weeder, owner of Hayward Hardware, describing a terrifying encounter. He says a thief grabbed an axe from his store when employees tried to stop him at the exit.
He showed the axe as though he was going to do something.
The man took off. Weeder says the suspect is no stranger to Hayward Hardware. He stole a backpack and tools. The business targeted 5 times in the last 5 weeks.
He's threatening, he's loud, he's violent, he's inebriated.
Weeder says the man has also hit Lucky, Safeway, Rite Aid, and the dollar store.
He's very well known to police. They know him instantly.
Weeder says police ID'd the suspect right away as 29-year-old Marquise Davis, a transient on probation who's often seen at food giveaways at New Hope Church. Weeder says he's been arrested numerous times, then released from jail in a day or two.
Do I get a lot of calls regarding this kind of bad behavior? Absolutely. We get calls of, people loitering in front of buildings. We'll get calls of smash and grabs in cars.
City Councilman Mark Salinas says he's received complaints from downtown merchants, not about Davis, but others. He calls the property crimes a chronic nuisance. He says the city is trying to ramp up community policing.
We also have a bike patrol where we have police officers that are, in parking lots and are in some of the alleyways.
Weeder says part of the problem, police hands are tied, in part due to Proposition 47, where some felony crimes are reclassified as misdemeanors, designed to give people a second chance.
This statute is being reviewed because of this very issue. This catch and release justice system is wreaking havoc on property owners.
Weeder is a big proponent of changing the law, disappointed since he says the city of Hayward has done a 180 to try and revitalize downtown.
This is not our problem. This is everyone's problem. This has got to stop. This has got to be fixed.
And so you didn't see this goofy-looking city councilman. He's sitting there explaining, oh, yeah, I heard about this stuff all the time. Oh, yeah. This is a city councilman who believes this is normal behavior and cops can't go around arresting black people because that's just not right, people. Wow. I mean, at some point, everybody has to look at this country, at this civilization that many, many people, better people than us, built up and handed it over to us. Did they know they were handing it over to people who looked at what they built and said, you know what, everything you built, this great civilization with great tradition, great legal traditions, great schools, great safety here, safety there, tradition of safety, public safety. We don't really tolerate criminal behavior or encourage it. We shun it, scorn it. Did they have any idea they were turning their civilization over to a clown like that who could look at somebody rampaging through his town of Hayward, California, and just look at it and go, hey, what are you going to do? That's where we are right now. Not just Hayward, not just California, all over the damn place. How many district attorneys do we have? Chicago, St. Louis, Boston, Philadelphia. On and on and on. These district attorneys are all cookie cutters now. They're all supported by George Soros and Black Lives Matter. They all know for sure too many black people are in prison for no reason whatsoever other than white racism. So we got to do what we can do to get them the hell out of there. Does anybody really think we can sustain this ridiculous level of denial, deceit, and delusion when it comes to black violence and criminality and dysfunction? Does anybody think we can just ignore it and it's going to go away? It's not going away. It's not just growing. It's growing. Now it's acceptable. Now it's a part of everything. We now know that people who call the cops on black people breaking the law, they are some kind of bad people. We now know that white people who call the cops on black people, they are just exhibiting their white privilege because their white privilege is the only thing that gives them a sense of entitlement when it comes to being safe in their neighborhoods. Why do you deserve that sense of entitlement, white person? Black people don't feel safe in their neighborhoods. That's the world we're living in. That's why we're doing this. Why I'm proud to be here with you. I hope you'll share this podcast and subscribe to it on every, you can subscribe to it in a million different places except for Apple. Because telling the truth about black violence and denial, even though there are no black people at Apple, they're pretty sure that makes the black kids angry.